Hello, everyone. Welcome to Planetary Health on the Menu, Sustainable Nutrition Careers panel event. We're so excited to have you all. Please feel free to introduce yourself in the chat. Let us know where you're calling in from and what you're hoping to get out of today's panel. If there's any particular questions you already have for our speakers, let them know in the chat. We're excited to dive in with this with you all and get to know you all a little bit better. We are going to get started in just 1 minute. So we're going to let a couple more people join and get situated. Please feel free to stay muted and keep your cameras off. Any questions you have throughout the duration of the event, you can send to the chat, but let us know where you're calling in from and if you're a dietitian or a food and nutrition professional and anything you're hoping to learn today. All right, wonderful. Well, I'm Greta. I'm going to be moderating today's event. I will be in the chat answering some questions and collecting your questions for speakers as they go through, and I will be asking them at the Q&A at the end of the event. So I want to get started. We will just introduce the Planetary Health Collective very quickly, and then we will let our speakers take it away and start sharing their stories of self. And then we will have questions that we've curated to maybe just dive a little bit deeper into their stories. And then at the end, there'll be an opportunity for you all to have your questions answered and feel free to submit those at any time during today's event. I'm Bretta. I'm the Director of Operations at the Planetary Health Collective. Mary Purdy, Integrative Eco-Dietitian, will be moderating the event as well. She is our Director of Operations at the Director of Education at the Planetary Health Collective. And our Executive Director, Ayten Salahi, is on maternity leave right now with her new babe. So we will catch up with her next time. Just want to go through the Planetary Health Collective and our mission, vision, values really quickly. So we are a movement to mitigate the climate crisis and nourish human health by leveraging the unique role of food and nutrition professionals to educate, incubate, and activate future leaders in food and nutrition sectors who are determined to use their practice and platforms to cultivate a more just, regenerative, and climate resilient future for all. And our vision is to become the go-to resource for food and nutrition professionals on the intersection of food, health, and climate, and provide an unparalleled opportunity for our community to channel their unique passions and skills to counter the climate crisis. So if that sounds like something that you're interested in, make sure you're following us on Instagram at the Planetary Health Collective. You can join our Facebook group. We'll share all the links in the chat momentarily. Our goals here are to educate. We learn and teach how to connect the dots between food, climate, labor, racial, and health justice, and provide educational opportunities to instill these learnings among food and nutrition leaders. Incubate. We welcome community members of all experience levels to foster their unique skills, passions, and connections to encourage creative problem solving and collaboration in support of just, climate positive, and nourishing food systems. And we take action alongside our allies to forge the path forward for systemic change in food and climate at local, state, and federal levels. So we're so excited that you all are joining us here today. And I just want to quickly touch on our theory of change so you have a little bit better idea of what we're hoping to do here. But we share the belief that human health is inseparable from the stewardship of Earth's natural systems, and food is the strongest.
I don't know if you have a different slide up, but we are only seeing the beginning slide. I don't know if you're moving the slides forward so others can see.
I am. Let me just reshare real quick.
Perfect.
Can you see this theory of change?
We can see the theory of change.
Wonderful. Thank you. So for our theory of change, first, we are food and nutrition professionals are uniquely poised to influence multiple sectors within the food system and champion more evidence-driven, healthful, and sustainable practices. 2, to leverage that influence, food and nutrition professionals require better mentorship, training, and tools on effective and accessible opportunities to advocate for multi-sectoral climate positive action. And 3rd, the PHC aims to build an active and competent coalition of leaders who effectively bridge food and nutrition practices with social and environmental justice and center communities most impacted. And with that, Mary, I will let you take it away and introduce our first panelist.
Thank you so much. And if I think we had should be another slide that should just showcase all the panelists. I'm not sure if you have that up or not, but no big deal if you don't. But welcome everybody. As Bretta said, it's always a pleasure to have so many of you here from so many different places. Continue to let us know where you are coming from and what you're excited and looking forward to tonight. We really thrive on building this amazing community of minds and creating a force for true change. And we have three agents of change with us tonight who I'm so thrilled and so honored to be able to have with us tonight. I'm going to ask everyone but the speaker to please shut off your video for right now, and just the speaker will have the spotlight on them. That would be so helpful so that we don't distract from the things that they are saying. So our first speaker, if you are all ready to go and raring for inspiration, is Christine McCullum Gomez. She is a consultant, writer, and a speaker based in Bogota, Colombia. Her research and work experience lie in food security and sustainable food systems. That's right, she's a doctor, PhD. Dr. McCullum Gomez is a column editor and serves on the editorial review board for the Journal of Hunger and Environmental Nutrition. And previously, she assisted in the development of food and environmental standards for the United Nations. And if you are a smart person, I highly recommend following Christine on all of her social media channels, because she provides absolutely incredible resources about the latest and greatest hits in food and sustainability and environmental justice. So take it away, Christine. So delighted to have you here.
Thank you for that gracious introduction. I think in a previous life, I may have been a librarian, and now I'm updating to the 21st century. I wanted to include a map of where I am here in Bogota, Colombia. It's the capital, and I've also included two photos. You can see here I am picking coffee cherries at a sustainable coffee farm in Salento, which is a well-known coffee growing zone in Colombia. Colombia is the second most biodiverse country in the world. It ranks second globally in plants, butterflies, freshwater fishes, and amphibian species, and it ranks first in bird species. This is the Colombian Family's Healthy Plate. It was developed in conjunction with the Colombian Food-Based Dietary Guidelines. It notes that for the population over 2 years old to eat natural and diverse foods. You can see here there's a wide variety of foods included on the plate. We have cereals, roots, tubers, and plantains, fruits and vegetables, milk and other dairy products. We have meat, fish, eggs, and dried legumes, as well as fats, mostly healthy fats, sugars. Also included is water, as well as physical activity. I've also included a picture of an aguacate. Many times when you search online for Colombian recipes, it calls for an avocado. Colombians do not eat avocados. Colombians eat aguacate. Avocados are grown in Colombia mostly for the export market, and they are available in supermarkets, again, primarily for expats. But I did want to point that out because I do find that it is a common error or oversight in the culinary world that's not based in Colombia. This is actually a diagram that was developed by the Pan American Health Organization, Sustainable Food Systems for Healthy Eating. Beginning with production, we want to promote crop diversification while maintaining soil health and adequate rotation. Second is storage and distribution. Third, processing and retailing. This includes food fortification only when necessary. I want to point out that food fortification is important, especially for high-risk populations in Colombia, such as school children. And the Colombian government does fortify flour, rice, pasta, and that has shown to be effective against anemia in school-aged children. There are other cases when it may not be warranted, and I'll talk about that in a minute. With regard to processing and retailing, we also have regulation. We have taxes on foods high salt, sugar, and fat, subsidies for healthy foods, as well as front of package nutrient labeling. You can see here, we have the World Health Organization's high in sugar octagonal warning label. Colombia recently passed a law to update its front of package warning label to go with the World Health Organization warning label. Previous research by Colombian researchers also showed that this was the most effective warning label to use with consumers. Colombia is also passing a tax on single-use plastics that will go into effect later this year, with the exception being for products covered by a circular economy certification. With regard to consumption, we want to cook and share more family meals, choose appropriate portion sizes, and avoid excess salt, sugar, and fats. Take advantage of all food parts to minimize food waste, and of course, appropriate food hygiene practices, including safe water. This is an example of an ultra-processed food product that was recently introduced into the marketplace in Colombia in March of this year. The Saltín Noel, galleta is cookie / cracker in Spanish. And you can see, if you look in the upper right-hand corner, it has a nutrient warning label high in sugar with several sugar cubes. This is the old nutrient warning label. It also has a health claim. In English, it translates to contributes to the normal functioning of the immune system. Well, Dr. Barry Popkin, who is a well-known nutrition transition researcher, has noted that this has become a more common trend, especially in South America. This could be potentially problematic in that Colombia is undergoing two transitions. One, a nutritional transition where a double burden of malnutrition exists. That means there's undernutrition along with overweight, obesity, and diet-related non-communicable diseases. There's also an alimentary transition where the traditional Colombian diet is being replaced with a more Western style diet. These are the new octagonal front of package nutrient warning labels that will be required as of next month. Some of them have already been switched over, some food products, but not all of them, but that will be mandatory as of next month. Now I'd like to switch gears a little bit and talk about something near and dear to my heart, food insecurity. The World Food Program recently released data that showed that between June and November of 2022, an estimated 15.5 million Colombians experienced food insecurity. This was about equal distribution from rural to urban areas, about 30%. However, the highest number of people affected are concentrated in urban areas. If you look at table 1, you can see there are big differences percentage-wise between, say, Bogota, which has a 19% food insecurity rate, with Cartagena, which has a 45% food insecurity rate. Well, if you look at some of the differences that have been reported in the World Food Program data, it notes that households who identified as African descendant or Afro-Colombian or indigenous had much higher levels of food insecurity than those who did not report belonging to either of those ethnic groups. If you go to Cartagena, it's an old Spanish city located on the Caribbean. It's considered a top tourist spot because of its old world charm. You can find apartments for sale for millions of dollars. However, in contrast to persons living in wealthy parts of Cartagena, people living in the barrio or poor neighborhood in Cartagena are disproportionately Colombians of Afro-Colombian descent. So there are social and economic inequalities in different parts of Colombia, including Cartagena. So what's driving the food insecurity? There are structural factors and there are conjunctural factors. In terms of structural factors, monetary poverty, 39% using 2021 data. However, some regions have much higher, 67%. Unemployment, informal unemployment. That means selling garbage bags on the street. It's a day-to-day crisis management situation, no Social Security, no long-term retirement, survival. And finally, conflict, violence, and displacement. Many indigenous peoples have been displaced from rural areas because of violence. They moved to the city. They may live in a shanty town. There are also migrants coming in from Venezuela because of the political upheaval there. As I mentioned, in addition to structural factors, there are also conjectural factors, including effects of the crisis in Ukraine, inflation, natural and climate disasters, including La Nina, which has been particularly hard on farmers because of flooding and mudslides, as well as COVID-19. I wanted to mention that for anyone who's interested in food insecurity and wants to move to Latin America, that there is a very strong, sustainable school feeding network that has been operating here for some time. And one of the recommendations from the World Food Program has been to strengthen social protection systems, including school feeding. So this is definitely an area that if you want to learn Spanish or already speak Spanish, this would be a great opportunity for you. And I just wanted to end with something that's happening here in Bogota, which is the Bogota es mi huerta. Bogota is my food garden. It's a program that was developed under the supervision of Marta Liliana Perdomo, who is the director of the Botanical Garden in Bogota. The purpose of the program is to restore Bogota's food growing traditions, improve food security, build climate resilience, and strengthen local communities in the process. And just to end with a quote from Marta Liliana, this project was really born during the pandemic when we realized that urban gardens in Bogota had great potential, not only as food production projects to prevent hunger and malnutrition, but also as spaces where families and residents can have the power within their own communities and have some kind of sovereignty that is not completely dependent on the outside world. So thank you very much for your time, and I look forward to answering questions at the end.
Thank you so much, Christine, and really inspiring to see all that you have learned and gained from your experience of living in Bogota. So thank you, and I will look forward to hearing more about what you actually are also doing. And yes, there's so much incredible research right now on the positive impacts to both environment and communities and public health of things like community gardens and urban farms. So it'll be interesting to hear more about that as well.
Yes, and living in Latin America, I mean, it is something that if you haven't lived here, people tell me, oh, I was in vacation in Cartagena and a nice resort with people waiting on me hand and foot. Well, believe me, living here is different, and I think it's a great opportunity. So I will be more than happy to speak to that later.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And just a note to our participants, if you're wondering about, sustainability and its relationship to food security and food equity, we at Planetary Health Collective really see sustainability as an umbrella term for not just things that have to do with the environment, but really having to do with is food equitably distributed, and do people have access to it, and what does that actually mean in terms of creating a sustainable food system? So so many different pillars that make up what it means to be sustainable. So thank you, Christine. And if you can turn off your video, I will invite Eva to turn on her video and introduce our next speaker, who is Eva Gulborn. She was employee #1 of an amazing organization called ReFed, the leading nonprofit which is dedicated to reducing U.S. food waste. And serving in multiple roles, she secured the initial funding from the Rockefeller Foundation, General Mills Foundation, Walmart Foundation, a lot of foundations, and helped it become the food waste leader that it is today. She started Littlefoot Ventures to provide more dedicated support and services to food businesses, foundations, and nonprofits focused on creating positive environmental, social, and economic impact. And she is the president of the Upcycled Food Foundations Board. And we had a speaker from the Upcycled Foundations organization speak as well. So welcome, Eva. I so look forward to hearing about all that you do and have done. So we're proud to have you here.
Thank you so much, and thank you, Mary and Bretta, for the opportunity to share my story. And I think hopefully everybody can see my little slideshow here. Not as robust. Mary, can you just let me know, because I don't have my.
You're good to go. It looks great.
Okay.
You just need to put it into share slides in slideshow mode. That's perfect. Where you have it right now.
Great. Well, yeah, again, thank you so much for the opportunity to be part of this conversation today. As Mary started to mention, Littlefoot is a food waste and sustainability consultancy. And it's sort of poetic to come after Christine talking so much about food security and food systems, because a lot of my work is born out of a focus on food waste, as Mary had mentioned in my bio. I have had an encyclopedic knowledge built out thanks to my time at ReFed, so you can guarantee that I'm really interesting at parties. But one of the things that I had been excited about from my time at ReFed was understanding how prolific the problem of food waste was. And our work had, been focused on the United States, but it is a global problem, both, globally and in the United States. We waste about 40% of our food, yet as was just highlighted in the context of food security in the US, we have 50 million people who are food insecure, and globally I think we're at 850 million who are either malnourished or food insecure. And it's just an insufferable problem, and it's something that everybody should be sort of horrified by and, quite frankly, pissed off about. When we have this other efficiency, we have enough pounds of food, we have enough nutrition, we have enough calories to feed a global food system, yet we can't seem to figure it out. So I became obsessed with the issue and had the opportunity to really learn a lot from my time at ReFed, and then decided to start this consultancy to do more direct support to organizations really across the entire supply chain. So I have clients like large CPGs like Hellmann's and Unilever, and Compass Group, which is the 6th largest employer in the world. It's a contract catering service provider. And then nonprofits and foundations, Natural Resources Defense Council, ampleharvest.org, Upcycled Food Association, Matriarch Foods. And really, there's no stakeholder I don't work with, and it's sort of by design, because my focus is really, how do I help any stakeholder who's committed to solving the climate crisis through food systems transformation. Anything that can happen from me being an amplifier in this space is sort of what I'm dedicated to doing. And let's see if I can advance here. I didn't have much on this slide. I was sort of looking forward to this conversation too, where it was hopefully going to be a little bit lighter than maybe some of the doom and gloom conversations we often do have about our climate and food systems. But as all of you are thinking about sort of your either your next move in your professional career or a new move entirely, some of you I know just graduated from college and are just starting out. Some of you may be, nutrition experts for many decades. But one of the things that I found empowering in my journey was starting my own practice. And it allowed me to really craft and carve out the services that I really believe and have sort of worked on in my own personal theory of change over the past 15 years in this space. And then allowed me to directly connect with large players in the space to do everything from philanthropic advising, fundraising strategy, with topical expertise in food system, food waste, and then also cause marketing and impact narrative strategy. Because I think one of the things that's become really interesting to me about operating in the food system space is it doesn't matter what part of food you're in. There's always a story to be told, and storytelling is really critical in the work that we're doing, whether you're focused on malnutrition and food security, whether you're focused on food waste the way that I am, or even, dining and restaurants. Really anything that touches food needs a better story in a lot of cases. So a lot of my work involves working with food brands and retailers to tell their existing sustainability story better to their consumers, to their eaters. And then in some cases, it's about telling the story of food systems in a more sort of urgent way as it connects to climate to their investors. And that really is sort of the interesting sweet spot that I found myself in. And a lot of people ask sort of why I started Littlefoot too. And I think that's important, again, as people are navigating their own professional careers, is just thinking about what is, in my case, it was becoming pregnant with my first child where I immediately got this sense of urgency to do more than I had been doing. And there was this legacy of environmental stewardship that I wanted to leave behind for my children and for yours. So that's a little nod to my babies, which is why I'm called Littlefoot Ventures. And I think it's really important as you're going through your career journey, thinking about the values that connect most to you. And it's sort of sometimes an annoying and cheeky exercise to do, but, you know, asking yourself that question, what would I do if I didn't have to make money? You know, if I just had all the time in the world or all the resources to do what I wanted to do. And my question is sort of a little bit like that, but really more focused on the values that you want to embody and the values in the work that you want to do. And I speak a lot to this and sort of challenge my clients a lot through the mentorship program that I do. Because one of the things for me, for example, that was really important was to have a multi-stakeholder facet to everything that I did. I believe that systems change is what's going to get us to that 2°C reduction that we need on this planet, and we can't do it alone. So all the work that I do has this flavor of multi-stakeholder engagement that I personally think is one of the key components of the change that we need to see. And another part of that, even in the most simple sense, and again, everybody's is sort of different, but I need to have a degree of emotional connection with the people and organizations that I work with. I need to be able to build that trust in those relationships with people so that, you know, if I'm challenging them on something that they haven't done before, or, you know, they're taking a risk in their business, then there's sort of that built-in trust-based relationship that allows me to do my work, you know, more effectively. So as you're thinking about what you're doing in your career, I really encourage you to think about those values that really represent who you are. And I feel like the sooner that we define those for ourselves, the more internally aligned we can be when we're not only looking for a new, you know, job or a new career, but just how we show up in the impactful work that I do, that we all do. Because I think for everyone here, clearly everyone is trying to do something with purpose, trying to do something with impact. And I think those are some really important components to have as part of that. So I'll wrap up for now. And I think we have my contact information for people too. So if you're interested in food waste and food systems, philanthropic advising, or anything food systems related, please reach out. And yeah, my 3-month mentorship program, I just launched it recently, has been so satisfying for people and for me selfishly to be able to provide that thought partnership for people in their career journey. So I would love to help you if it's relevant. And yeah, just grateful to be part of this conversation as you're all noodling on how to do more in this space.
Thank you so much, Eva. And thank you for mentioning the idea of hope in the gloom and doom space. I think we don't get very far when we get stuck in the gloom and doom narrative, and the stories of hope and the stories in general, I think, are what really speak to people and get people's hearts moving in the right direction.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll talk more because I want to hear more about your mentorship and more about how you help those brands build their stories, because I think that's something that people who are attending today can really offer their expertise on as well. So thank you. Our last speaker, and if everyone can please turn off your videos until Sana is done. So our last speaker is Sana Delmonico. She is a dietitian and a culinary nutritionist and associate professor at the Culinary Institute of America, also known as the CIA, at Greystone. She previously led programming for the CIA's Healthy Kids Collaborative and the CIA Harvard Healthy Kitchens, Healthy Lives Conference, as well as authoring an online nutrition course for chefs for the American Culinary Federation. Welcome, Sana. So lovely to have you with us.
Thank you so much. I'm really inspired by Christine and Eva's presentations, and I feel like we have been in this big space, and we're going to like move down into my little classroom. So I am an associate professor at the Culinary Institute, the California campus, which is in the Napa Valley, and I teach food safety, culinary math, gastronomy with a G. A lot of people think it's astronomy, but I don't know anything about the stars. Gastronomy. And then I also teach nutrition to our students. They're in an associate degree program. They can major in either culinary arts or baking and pastry. So these are the future culinarians, the future chefs of the world. We have a lot of international students as well as students from the US. Some of our grads are like Duff Goldman and Kat Cora. So people that may get into, you know, a big audience. And because I teach a variety of different liberal arts classes, I get to interact with virtually every student on our campus, which I think is just such an incredible opportunity for me to get to impact their perception of food and their perception of sustainability. So in addition to our graduate degree or degree programs, we have both undergraduate and graduate programs. The CIA also has a number of different health and wellness initiatives. And one of them is our Global Plant Forward Summit, and then also our Menus of Change Summit, which I wanted to just highlight a project that I work with students on. So I'm going to share my Menus of Change principles. So the Menus of Change conference is a collaboration between the CIA and the Harvard Chan School of Public Health. We focus on bringing in volume food service chefs, so chefs that feed literally millions of people every day in their operations. Bring in the chefs together with the Harvard nutrition scientists, with environmental scientists, to talk about the intersection of business practices, human and planetary health, as well as delicious food, which is of course what the CIA is really all about, is delicious food. So there's some business practices on the left and nutrition and food principles, ingredient principles on the right. And I take the Menus of Change principles into my classroom with my students, into my nutrition class with my culinary students and my baking and pastry students. And I have a project where they're designing menus based on the Menus of Change principles. So they have to draw on their culinary skills. They have to draw on their food knowledge that they're acquiring and their increasing nutrition knowledge that they're getting in my class to design menus that really centers plants, that considers the sustainability of seafood, that moves legumes and nuts to the center of the plate, that thinks produce first, all of those different Menus of Change principles that you see there. And as the students are working on this project, just so many big questions come up for them, like, you know, as somebody that's going to feed a lot of people in my career, and somebody that's going to buy a lot of food in my career, do I have a responsibility to the health of my customers? Do I have a responsibility to the health of my local economy, my local community? Do I have a responsibility to planetary health? So we talk a lot about, I'm going to try to change the slide here. There we go. There we go. We talk a lot about the flip. And by the flip, I mean the flip of ingredients on the menu, as well as the flip of ingredients on the plate. So this slide is really talking about rebalancing the menu, flipping the emphasis on those four main meats that people see on menus all the time, right? If you, any restaurant that you go into, there's beef, there's pork, there's chicken, there's seafood, which is, you know, either salmon or shrimp, and not a whole lot else, right? So the emphasis is on flipping that. What can we do to make more plant forward entrees, more dishes that are inspired by world cuisines that do center plants as the center of the plate? Because in the culinary world, meat and is really still seen as the entree. It's really still seen as the center of the plate. So flipping that idea, as well as just flipping individual dishes. How can we take what we would think of as a usual entree with a piece of meat and vegetables and legumes or some other kind of starchy food, and how can we flip the proportions of that to make it more healthful and more sustainable? So when the students are working on this project, it really helps them kind of connect the dots and understand that not only are some of the most healthy proteins delicious, but also some of the most sustainable as well. So I'm going to move this along here. One of the things that I think is super important, and I love that Eva mentioned, the positivity around this work, because I get a lot of pushback from my students saying, well, this is, if I'm considering nutrition, if I'm considering sustainability, that's going to limit what I can do creatively in the kitchen. And I don't look at it like that at all in any way. And I try to highlight, as is highlighted in this slide, the really creative work with plant forward menus that lots of chefs are already doing. Considering nutrition and sustainability doesn't limit chefs. The 4 animals limit chefs and limit what they can do creatively. So, flipping those dishes and flipping the menu expands their artist's palette, really. I always say to them, if you have more different colors of crayons in your box, you can make more creative artwork. If you think about all the amazing things you can do with vegetables, if you think about partnering with a local producer for seasonal fruit, or maybe a farmer that doesn't have a market for the grains varieties that they want to grow, or all those different heirloom varieties of legumes that are available. So for me, this is a super positive message. I always say to my students, when you're more creative in the kitchen, when you consider nutrition, when you consider sustainability, that actually means that you have reach way beyond the kitchen. And that's how I want to keep it positive. All right, so that is what I have. I will be glad to answer questions, and I will stop sharing.
Thank you so much, Sanna. So fun to see those beautiful photos of those delectable meals, and I definitely want to get some more data on how that's been working. So let me bring back our other speakers. Christine, if you would put your video and mute button off, and same with Eva. Thank you so much. So good to have you all back here. So now is an opportunity for me to ask you a few questions, a little bit about both your presentations and just some questions in general, and then we'll get some questions that are coming in from our audience chat. But I wanted to ask you, Eva, a question about something that you mentioned, which is story, which we know is such a way to connect with audiences, with consumers, with businesses. And I'm curious if you have a specific example of a way that you were able to help a business, a person, a company, an organization weave a story into the way that they promote their business or their product, and how that was effective in terms of discussing sustainability as one of their initiatives.
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's such a unique challenge, and so pervasive, again, like I was mentioning, across any topic, subtopic of food that you work within. I'd say one of the best examples was the first 2 Super Bowl commercials from Hellmann's that were the first 2 commercials that were ever dedicated to the topic of food waste. The most public stage, arguably, I think, in the world, cajillion eyeballs looking at, the Super Bowl, sometimes more excited about the commercials than the actual, football. And what was interesting for Hellmann's was, as a brand of purpose, the purpose that they wanted to sort of focus on was creating healthy meals and making taste not waste as sort of like their campaign for this work. And so it was a really unique challenge, trying to figure out how to support an authentic script, basically. Like, I'm obviously no movie producer, I'm no creative in the advertising space. And so what was interesting in putting together the Pete Davidson commercial, if people happen to watch football or have seen these commercials from Hellmann's, there's such subtle changes that you can make when you're working with people around their relationship with food. So for example, the premise of this commercial was tackling food waste in the home. It's a football commercial. So they have this linebacker tackling people literally in front of their refrigerators as they're like, oh, I've got nothing to eat. And even the placement of what was in the fridge and what the linebacker suggested that they make with those foods, like, you know, soggy spinach, you know, make a spinach frittata, or, you know, like taking the extra bread and, you know, he's like, you got to make a ham and cheese sandwich or something. Just little things about making sure that there was a connection to things that were really commonly wasted. Like, I'm sure all of us have a clamshell of spinach that may be like going a little funky in the fridge right now. We may have that rotisserie chicken. That's another one of those frequently and commonly wasted foods, and bread and potatoes. So even things that just have the client pay really close attention to what relates to you back at home, and not like, oh no, don't waste the caviar and the foie gras. I would be like, okay. And so just really making sure that there was those small tweaks in the script so that unconsciously people saw that it was food that was most likely to also be in their kitchens,
Nice.
would probably be one of the more notable examples. And that was a
Excellent.
really fun challenge.
You know, I don't think of Hellman's as like, you know, screaming sustainability. So amazing to know the possibilities that are out there for all of us.
Yeah.
Thank you. And Christine, question for you about your work. You've been a dietitian, you are a PhD, and you're also very passionate about insecurity. How are you weaving your nutritional expertise in with your goals around sustainability and the work that you're currently doing?
Well, I wanted to clarify that my PhD research was on power. And so I really had an interest from a sociological perspective of understanding food within the context of communities, government, and other political systems that can drive or prohibit change. So I look at nutrition within that broader context, and I have expertise in participatory action research. Now, participatory action research, or PAR, is very common in Latin America. People have very few resources. They don't necessarily have NIH to apply for a $50 million grant. They want research that results in action on the ground. And so I think perhaps my love affair with Latin America had to do with similar value systems. And so, you know, working with the community to set the agenda and then drive change was very important to me. And of course, healthy eating is a part of that. But I want it to be something that comes from the community, not from me necessarily, and I can help drive that change, working as a facilitator or a moderator. And so I do volunteer work. There are shanty towns in southern Bogota. I mean, people may not know that. So it just combining my love of action in the community with research for the common good, and then interjecting healthy eating into that broader ecological model.
Yes, excellent. Thank you. I mean, it's amazing how we can tap into the many skills that we have developed over years. You know, I have a theater background before I was a dietitian, but being able to grab all of the things that you did, it's never wasted time. Any other actions that we've taken in our lives, being able to put those to use. So,
well, theater is also very valuable in the health world because there are sensitive topics like HIV in Africa. And if they can use theater, especially for politicians and political leaders, it may be much less taboo and accepted, and things can change for the better, for the positive.
Absolutely. Thank you. And Sana, question for you about the work that you're doing with the CIA. I won't tell anybody. You are working with the culinary chefs. I'm curious about how you communicate to customers around the plant-based foods, because I know there is often some pushback from people who want to feel like they can choose whatever they want. How are you suggesting that people communicate the importance of the sustainability and the health, and the merging of those two, the health benefits of more plant-centric meals? And what has been the response from customers? Do they care when they hear about sustainability and health as benefits of more plant-centric meals?
Well, my customers really are my students and the chefs that I work with. So, you know, yeah, there is pushback, and in the sense of feeling like they may be limited. And I think that's, you know, what I was kind of trying to address, that I don't see it like that. I'm the only nutritionist on our California campus. So I often say that I am sometimes seen as the Debbie Downer of the food world. And I don't see it like that at all. You know, I feel like I am the person that is here to spread more variety. And, you know, so people respond to that. And I will say that, you know, a lot of the chefs really emphasize sustainability and reducing food waste in their classrooms. The chefs are really concerned about those things. And they kind of have two competing things going on. The, you know, traditional French cuisine training that they've received and, you know, the current state of our knowledge around health and sustainability. So a lot of the chefs are trying to integrate those things. And frankly, they're doing a great job. So my students then are more receptive to that message because we're all on the same page.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's amazing the role that chefs are stepping into now as being grand influencers. There's so much power that they have in what is being served, both on a small and a large scale. You know, going back to what Eva talked about with Compass, you know, the people who are controlling what's being served on the plate. So one final question for each of you, and this is sort of just a general overview of something that I think would be helpful for our participants, and I'll send it over to Bretta. But you are all in positions that you are in for a specific reason. You talked about how you got into it. I'm curious if there was, maybe if you were to choose one or two things that you feel like were really beneficial to get you to where you are today as it relates to your understanding of sustainability in the food system, what would that have been, or what would you advise that people look to as a resource to get there?
Well, this is Chris. I'll go first. My first year of my PhD at Cornell, I took a year-long environmental policy course with Dr. David Pimentel. Dr. Pimentel was well known in sustainable agriculture, energy use in food systems, as well as vegetarian nutrition. He's published prolifically, including in nutrition journals such as the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition. The year I took the course, we focused on biodiversity. And we later had a publication published in Bioscience. And I just saw last month, almost 25 years later, that it was cited in a new paper on nitrogen fixation in soybeans in Brazil. So getting that introduction in graduate school, taking that year-long environmental policy course, I think that was key of what kind of set my trajectory of how I could broaden my interest. I'm concerned about deforestation, how that is connected to food and agriculture. Maybe if I hadn't taken that course, I wouldn't have went that way.
Excellent. That's great to know. And just a little side note plug here. We do have a food and climate foundations course where we have a whole module that's dedicated to food and environmental policy. So just to put a plug in for that, because I think that is a really key way to help people connect the dots between how we are growing our food and the impact that has on sustainability and health. So sorry, Eva, looked like you got something to say here.
Oh, yeah. And I was just going to say, I cannot wait to take that course and learn more too, because that's so relevant to my work as well. So I want to learn more. I think to answer your question in a less elegant way than Chris, I had studied conflict and security when I was at school. So I was reading about the Cold War and intercontinental ballistic missiles and a totally different world, and then minored in art history. Again, a totally different world than the world that I'm in now. And I mentioned that cheekily too, just for people who, because there was also like no food systems programs or any of the incredible programs that people are doing today. I never even knew that things like that existed. And if they did, it was just like an environmental studies minor maybe that you could do. And I mentioned that just for the people who may be sort of second guessing themselves on the one hand, like you're either a registered dietitian or you're not. It's like that's sort of binary, but there's so many opportunities to get into sustainable food systems and to get into this work that in some ways, almost the more knowledge you're bringing in from an entirely different field, the more valuable you can be. So I would encourage people to think, not about sort of, oh, I don't have that food systems degree or that PhD in, food psychology or whatever it may be, but just thinking about the ways that they can bring forward their other expertise. And the other thing I would say too is I have a supreme sense of audacity to think that I can do something, and an obsession with it. I am a total like nut about thinking that there's a possibility that I can be part of a solution. So I think, as lean into the crazy in terms of, your meaning, like your passion, and also curiosity. It is certainly, none of us are we know everything and nothing all at the same time. We're all, have clearly, especially these two other women have had so much experience and so much success in their roles, but at the same time, for us to always stay curious about, well, how can that connect, for me as a food waste person, how can that connect to more plant-based diets, and how could that connect to nutrition insecurity, and my work in the US, how does that connect to Latin America? So just constantly having a voracious appetite for learning and connecting, I think will always lead you to where you need to go in this work.
Fantastic. And that's systems thinking for you right there. So thank you for bringing that up, Eva. And Santa, one last word for you.
Yeah, I love the audacity, Eva. And I totally agree. You just have to believe that
Borderline
you
on crazy, but
can do it. Yeah. Embrace the crazy. There you go. Yeah. And I think, for me, it really came from a much smaller place. Like, I'm an extremely curious gardener and cook. And doing that for myself, for my family, showed me a lot of things about the broader food system that made me curious to then branch into that and more. And I just think that, encouraging people to cook and encouraging people to garden, if you are at all interested in food in those ways, then you are drawn to thinking about food waste, about sustainability, about all of these topics we've been talking about, because you understand more why it's so important.
Yeah, I think you bring up an incredibly important point, which is how personal it is. And sometimes when we start with those small baby steps and we make it really personal, my garden, my kitchen, the ability to cook, and how that translates into a bigger picture. So thank you for bringing that in. We've got our environmental sustainability course, we have our bold audaciousness, and we have that personal touch of where we can begin right in our own home. So thank you.
Right, like subscribe to a CSA. That's how
Brilliant. Brilliant. All right, I'm going to let Bretta take over now with some questions from our audience here. And I thank you all again for your time, and we'll see you at the end.
Amazing. Very inspiring. I'm excited to dive in a little bit deeper. So we had a question from the audience real quick. They had done like a CIA tour in Hyde Park and noticed that like Smithfield or like a lot of other sponsors sponsored like classrooms and programs. And they were just wondering if this is the same in California at your campus or if it's different. And then if that impacts like the teaching or the students or anything like that. And any thoughts you have on those?
Sure. Yeah. The CIA works with a lot of different companies, and, and with the Menus of Change initiative, for example, we are targeting companies that need to change. We're targeting volume food service. We're targeting fast food. We're targeting people in those companies that have interest in making change. And so, yeah, we do work with those companies. I think Eva mentioned Unilever, for the same reasons that we need to help those companies understand why this is so important. And so a lot of the Menus of Change, for example, bringing together the Harvard scientists with chefs, with environmental scientists to make those connections.
I think maybe if I could add to that too, Santa, that really implied in that question really showcases the tension that we often find in our food work, where the big players are sort of undeniable in terms of we need their buy-in, we need their dollars, we need their understanding that they have to be part of the solution. And then on the other side, these very critical grassroots movements and sort of that more community driven work is sometimes very much at odds. Big food and these community-driven organizations and work. And that's something that is prevalent even in a kitchen that I was in recently with the Chef Ann Foundation. Tons of opportunity for them to get funding and checks written to have dedicated sections, the Smithfield this or the Unilever that. And, for them, it was really critical for them to never take money from large brands and do things. And of course, there's the pros and cons to both of those, because even the funding and sort of strategic positioning has to be done like completely outside of that. But to your point too, it's like they have to be part of the solution. And that's one of those sort of tensions that I think we always all see in this space between big and small food.
Yeah, I think we have to find a way that it's not just either or, and a way that it can be like both and bringing that together and making space for both. So thank you both for your thoughts there. Christine, I have a question about how you feel Colombia is adaptable to food systems change compared to like the US, and what differences you see there, if that's something that you're comfortable speaking on.
Yeah, it's really interesting because I imagine all of you are familiar with WWF, World Wildlife Fund. They have an office in Colombia, in Bogota. So I have used many of their reports to illustrate messages to university faculty who are knowledgeable in nutrition, but not necessarily food systems, students. Now, the students here that I've seen and talked to, they're very well aware of food systems. They talk about native seeds. I mean, they're really, because I think the Latin culture by nature is connected to food and where their food comes from. So while we do have ultra processed foods, the percentage in the food supply is much lower than in the United States. People are aware of where their food comes from. The issue of poverty is the limiting factor. This goes back to the Spanish Inquisition centuries ago, when indigenous people were forced off their land. There have been numerous attempts over hundreds of years for land reform, not only because of government and the elites wanting to control the land, but it also became an opportunity for multinational corporations to come in and make sweet deals, that they can then export their product. So if you are a worker on a coffee farm or a banana plantation, you're not necessarily benefiting from that system. So right now there's a tension. We have a leftist government. There are attempts to move forward. Right now there's a huge scandal happening within the Petro family. I won't get into that. So people often say the more things change, the more they stay the same. So with the history of inequalities of land and wealth, that's the bigger problem. And so incremental change, we don't want to lose hope because of corruption and violence. We have narco ranching, just like in Central America. So just looking at what can be done locally on a grassroots level and connecting with NGOs, such as WWF and others that are doing fantastic work. Colombia is designated a type 1 food system, similar to Brazil. So there is incremental change. There are groups on the ground that are trying to, but to make it official government policy is a challenge because of the links with illicit cattle ranching, narco traffickers, corporations that want more profit for less. So it's an ongoing challenge, but there are many groups on the ground that are doing things to the best of their ability with the resources they have.
Fantastic insight. So interesting just to learn more about the food system in other places and what barriers people might have, especially since we have a global food system, and grasping those little nuances there and like what might be impacting us as well. So thank you so much for sharing. And then Eva, my question for you is just was there a moment where, you decided I know your kiddos helped spark some interest in starting your own business, but were there any other driving forces for you to like make that change and taking on your own business?
Short answer, no. there was like that scene in Sleeping Beauty where she's in the trance and she's just sort of walking up the stairs about to touch the spindle. There was just like something that took over me, that just felt so intuitive. And, you know, when I talk to people in my, through my mentorship program, part of the reason why I started it too was that's the sort of the number one question I get is, you know, how did you start? Like, where did you, you know, how did you know that you were going to start a business? And the truth of the matter is, like, you know, it's been, you know, all sort of this like very strange pathway. But something intuitively let me know I was offering services that were close enough to my skill set from my work with Refed, and then again was audacious enough to think that like I might be able to serve some clients that I sort of worked very slowly in terms of where I took the business. But I know that everybody's always sort of looking for that like light switch of like, should I jump into my own thing, you know, or work for a big company or do research, whatever. And it's so personal for different people. So I just, yeah, there was something, that Aurora moment, my Sleeping Beauty moment, that just led me there. And I've never looked back. So
Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing. My final question for tonight, just to be respectful of everybody's time, although we could go on for probably another hour. Sana, how do you, we have a lot of dietitians on the call, and I feel like sometimes, you know, if you had mentioned you're the only dietitian at CIA in California, and just how you kind of bridge that gap, kind of being on your own with all these other people, and, you know, they're seen as like, oh, you make food less fun. And how do you communicate that to other people, or kind of grapple with that and really highlight the role of a dietitian in this work?
Yeah, right. I mean, in my nutrition class, I'm always talking about the fact that everyone has an opinion about nutrition, and yet what we're going to be talking about is the scientific evidence for that. You know, so I think it's kind of been a matter of time. I mean, I always liken it to, I initially was a pediatric dietitian. I worked in the NICU, and it took a long time for the neonatologist to take me seriously. And I think it's been a similar kind of experience working with chefs, that, you know, sometimes it takes a long time for people to get to know you and understand that you do have an awful lot to offer, and that you have expertise that's adjacent to theirs, but you can take them beyond that, and you can also help them do their work. So, you know, at this point now, chefs come to me all the time and ask for help with what they're doing. Am I giving the right message about the healthfulness of food, things like that? I think it's just, you know, sticking in there and being a resource and being a good colleague.
Fantastic. Thank you all so much for sharing all your expertise with us today. That is it for our panel. So wonderful to hear all of your stories of self and how you've gotten to where you're at and all the phenomenal work you're doing. Thank you everyone for coming tonight. Mary, if you have any final words, go ahead.
Yes, I just want to thank everyone for being on the panel, and to everyone out there for asking great questions. And just know that we are here to be a resource for you and to build community. And we are here as agents of change to help you understand what your role can be in as being an agent of change in the food system transformation as well. So look to us. We're going to be taking some time off in the next couple of months, but we do have our Food and Climate Foundations course that will be available to you coming up this summer. But feel free to reach out to all of us, and we hope you'll take a look at the websites and social media information of our fantastic panelists. So thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Buenas noches.
Buenas noches. Muchas gracias.
Ciao.